On Thursday, we found out that most of the leaks were true, including Black Ops 4 not having a traditional single-player campaign. Considering that I haven't played a campaign since Call of Duty World at War, when it was a co-op campaign that you could play with friends, this news wasn't as huge of a blow to me. I always thought of myself as the norm, someone that doesn't even touch the single player and just plays the online multiplayer portion of the game, which seems to back up the narrative that Treyarch is pushing with their decision to scrap it in Black Ops 4. They want to deliver the content that the majority of their audience wants to experience. Treyarch explained in interviews with both Polygon and Eurogamer that the rumors which swirled around about the campaign being scrapped because it wouldn't be finished in time for the month earlier than normal release date were, to borrow a term from Orange Cheeto Jesus, fake news. In fact, Treyarch never had plans for the traditional campaign from the onset. Even though I can't verify that Treyarch is just trying to spin a negative into a positive, or even calling it innovative and challenging to remove core features in a game to chase trends, despite the multiple reports of the scrapped campaign, I don't trust developers as far as I can throw them. However, also during those interviews, Dan Bunting commented that when he first started on Call of Duty, that only 10% of people were playing multiplayer, while now it's around 90% of people playing the multiplayer. Considering that he started with Call of Duty World at War, we can look back at the game achievements and sales figures to determine if this is another one of the classic zombie lies we've all come to know and love from our favorite franchise. According to PSNprofiles.com, which tracks PlayStation trophies, we can see that 75% of people that bought Call of Duty World at War at least completed the first mission of the game playing solo, which doesn't actually include people like me that played only the co-op version of the campaign, but it's a good benchmark for determining how many people actually played the campaign. According to VGCharts.com, there were 5.43 million people that bought World at War, meaning that a shade over 4 million players actually played the campaign. Since there are no multiplayer trophies in World at War, we have to look at the leaderboards to determine how many people at least logged into multiplayer to get on the leaderboards. While I didn't scroll all the way down to the bottom after nearly 10 minutes of attempting, there are at least 3.5 million players on the multiplayer leaderboards for World at War, which is 65% of the owners of the game that at least went on to multiplayer for one time, meaning that the number is vastly higher than the 10% nonsense that was quoted earlier. Not to mention, we can see at least 45% of the people completed the campaign on any difficulty, which means that at least 2.44 million people stuck around to at least complete the story. That's a lot of people invested enough in the game's single player to make it all the way through to the end. If you fast forward to the most recent Call of Duty game that Treyarch developed in Black Ops 3, you can see that 73% of people that own Black Ops 3 completed a trophy that says, in campaign, kill an enemy through a wall or obstruction, which I'm assuming is actually harder than beating the first mission, but there isn't a trophy for that, and almost 11 million players started the campaign based on the sales figures of 15.02 million total for Black Ops 3 on PS4. For multiplayer, 74.6% of players got the trophy that stated that a player had made it to level 10 in multiplayer, which you could probably do in a handful of matches. And by the way, Bunting, I know that math at Treyarch isn't its strong suit, but that's more than 15% less than the 90% figure that you quoted during the interview. But it's only 1.6% higher than the number of people that started playing the single-player campaign. I couldn't believe this when I saw it. The data clearly shows that there's almost as many people that play campaign as do the multiplayer part of the game. That's mind-blowing. Where things get more interesting is longevity, as 47.7% of players get the achievement that says they made it to level 55 in multiplayer, which is much more than the 23% of players that beat the campaign on any difficulty. While I don't have any multiplayer longevity stats for Call of Duty World at War since they didn't have any achievements for multiplayer, it's clear to see that while starting the campaign has around the same percentages as the first Dan Bunting game, actually completing it is a different story altogether. Maybe it's just because Black Ops 3's campaign was utter shite. Let's check out some other Treyarch games. Black Ops 2 had 64.3% of players beat the first mission, with 38.2% of players completing the last mission, and the original Black Ops is 74.3% of players beating the first mission, with a whopping 50.45% of players beating the entire game. I guess the lesson here is if you don't make a shitty campaign, people will actually play it. Who would have thunk it? If we look at the most recent game, Call of Duty World War II, only 58% of owners completed at least the first mission, but 31.56% of players stuck around to the end, meaning those that started it actually mostly enjoyed it long enough to keep going, as there's only a 27 or so % difference. Now, let's contrast that with multiplayer for the most recent game. 64.8% of players got 10 kills in multiplayer, which is something that you could probably do in a game or two. Meanwhile, only 21% of players entered Prestige 1 in multiplayer, which would signify probably the more hardcore audience. And while not everyone enters Prestige in multiplayer, again, like me for example, it shows the longevity comparison between the campaign and multiplayer isn't really that far off percentage-wise. Now, obviously, multiplayer is infinitely more replayable. However, the percentages of players that are doing so is a 40% difference for Call of Duty World War II and a 27% difference in Black Ops 3. Alright, I'll stop mathing you for a second here to draw a conclusion. To say that not many players even bother playing the campaign and it's not a selling point for purchasing the game is a zombie lie. It's absolute bullshit. In Treyarch's own last game, Black Ops 3, 3/4 of the players at least started playing the campaign. That's a fuckload of people. And when they claim that they want you to play with your friends in the reveal, that's also a bullshit excuse given that both Black Ops 3 and World at War both had co-op campaigns which allowed you to play with your buddies. The majority of players actually play the campaign, which is something I thought wasn't true until I looked at the numbers, Mason. The actual excuse for not delivering a single-player campaign and then claiming its innovation is because the campaign isn't as monetizable as multiplayer or zombies, not the retention rates or the player populations of people playing the single-player mode. DLC always has 4 multiplayer maps and a zombies experience, no campaign, and this happens 4 times during the life cycle of the game. Micro DLC and loot boxes you can play dress up with in an FPS for multiplayer zombies, and now especially in the new Battle Royale mode, but not in the campaign. One of the only reasons why I'm even considering the no season pass rumor to be true instead of bullshit is because they make so much fucking money off of RNG crates via gambling for underage kids that they don't want to divide the community with season passes anymore, so that all players, not just those that throw down the extra $50, will come crawling back to the game the minute a hot new piece of content is created, so that they can get more people back into pulling that lever of the loot boxes to make them even more fucking money. They've seen player retention numbers in games like Halo 5 and Titanfall 2 when DLC is given away for free, and there's actually more people playing the game further on in the life cycle than there was that started at the beginning of the life cycle, in comparison to Call of Duty World War II and Battlefield 1, where the season pass only keeps a segment of the community coming back when new paywalled beepity bops are available. Anyways, rant aside, there are ways in which Activision, spelt with a $, can actually give people more content for single-player campaigns beyond the initial launch. We saw this in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 with the DLC Season of Content, which introduced Spec Ops missions as DLC items which you could play co-op with your friends online. Also in Modern Warfare 3 was a brand new Chaos mode that was a solo-only affair, but you competed on leaderboards against players from around the world, as well as having all of the multiplayer DLC maps being brought into the survival game mode, which you could also play solo, or with one other person if you wanted to. You know, that whole play with friends thing that Black Ops 4 seems to be preaching. Call of Duty Ghosts was the first and last game to have both a zombies-type co-op horde mode with Extinction and a survival mode based on the multiplayer maps with Safeguard, which they did a new zombies experience with each DLC, and they also had the multiplayer maps from the DLC rolled into the survival-type game mode, as well as new story missions with each DLC. Of course, this would take more development investment, try saying that 5 times fast, so Activision wouldn't bother doing that because that's far more costly than just trying to milk the fan base for micro DLC, which makes them a shitload of money. So stop bullshitting us, Treyarch and Activision, when it comes to your reasons behind scrapping the campaign. It's not because people want to play with their friends, because Black Ops 3 had a co-op campaign. It's not because, as we've heard around the community, nobody plays the campaign, because 73% of players at least started to play it in Black Ops 3, which aligns with the percentages across the spectrum of Call of Duty games, and that's a pretty decisive majority of the people that buy the fucking game. The real reason is because you decided to not finish a story mode, which wasn't going to make it on time for a month early release date, and instead swapped in yet another way to make all of the money when it comes to monetization of a Battle Royale mode versus monetizing a campaign, which can be done, as I pointed out, but is far more difficult than doing palette swaps of weapons or character models, because you actually need to, have some writing and hire some fucking voice actors that don't sound more bland than a goddamn piece of unbuttered toast. Enough with the fucking zombie lies, people. I've been The Schwantz 27, out like the Winnipeg Jets. Until next time.